Welcome to the Better Buildings, Better Society podcast. Twice a month, we interview interesting individuals and get insight into what they think makes building better members of society. Subscribe to our podcast and share with your friends. Hi, I'm Stephen Forrester, founder and principal of DMA Engineering. My passion lies in the built environment and in the mechanical systems that keep buildings running at their optimum efficiency, while at the same time provide the best possible health and comfort to their occupants. In this way, DMA is absolutely committed to making buildings better members of society. This podcast focuses on energy efficiency through the eyes and experience of building industry professionals. Together with my guest, I will lead all of us on an exploration of how to build better energy efficiency buildings, how to save our clients time and money, and offer practical advice for those interested in the built environment. Join me, a mechanical engineer, outdoor enthusiast, and green advocate as I interview guests with leading edge ideas for creating better buildings and a better society. Hello again. I am Stephen Forrester, principal of DMA Engineering. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Better Buildings, Better Society. This week, we have Conor Merrigan. He is a sustainability program manager at Spirit Environmental Consultants. He is an expert in strategic sustainability and energy planning. Conor offers technical expertise, project management skills, and knowledge of industry best practices to deliver ambitiously practical solutions for their clients. This commitment to sustainable actions has driven his initiatives in city planning, energy program leadership for the state of Colorado, and a host of experience in sustainability consulting. We are excited to be hosting Conor and thrilled to explore more about his innovative approach can make buildings better members of society. With that, it is our privilege to welcome Conor to the show and learn more about what inspires him. So how are you doing today, Conor?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the generous introduction.
Well, got to acknowledge the good work we do these days, right?
Right.
So yeah, give us a little bit of history about yourself. I know you worked for the Colorado Energy Office there for a while. That was, yep. So that was exciting, but what else should we know about you?
Yeah. So before that, I actually got my start in building buildings, working construction out of college, and eventually actually fairly quickly pivoting to green construction, built straw bale homes from the ground up, primarily in Colorado for a few years, and then started thinking about building straw bale neighborhoods, went back to school to get a master's in urban planning with that sort of focused concept of how do I build a straw bale housing master plan community, which is still unchecked on my list, but did that and figured out sort of the how to work things at the planning and real estate scale, and then got back into green building consulting. So ended up back doing lead work, did some lead for neighborhood development, which was sort of when that came out. I got out of grad school and there was a perfect marriage. Did some consulting right away, got hired by a sustainability consulting firm, the one formerly known as YRG. I did a lot of lead work with them, as well as helping to lead up their sustainable communities division before I went to the energy office. And so at the energy office, I ran the high performance building program and eventually the whole of the commercial energy efficiency program, with a real focus on performance contracting. And then from there went on to more sustainability consulting at both the building scale, the organizational level, the city level. And that led me to eventually come into my current position, managing a sustainability program and leveling it up for a environmental consulting firm where we still do work. And we'll be focusing today a little bit on some of our work in the built environment, but also do a lot of work with large industrials, oil and gas, and sort of large strategic sustainability planning for cities and counties. So that's pretty much up to date.
Well, that's a lot. So on the straw bale home community, is that going to be a bucket list item, or is that still like, yeah, we'll see?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably less likely at this late stage in my career. And as my understanding of buildings and strategic planning has evolved, I think there's still a place for it. But I think there may be it's less of where my primary impact could be felt. I could see myself eventually moving into the right situation, but I think it's more situational. I think at this point, that is a box most likely to remain unchecked.
Well, unchecked boxes just showed we dreamt big, and then our perspective changed, right? So it's always good to have those, right? I mean,
I love that perspective.
Yeah. If you're not dreaming big enough, you're probably not having any unchecked boxes. So that's just the way it goes. Yeah. So with your work right now, what's the biggest challenge you're facing with your work?
Wow, the biggest challenge? Well, honestly, the biggest challenge I would say is trying to sort through the acronym soup of ESG methodologies to align on a single set of them or series of them to recommend to our clients to give them a clear path forward. We have a lot of actually very progressive, primarily oil and gas companies that have recognized the need and the timing to differentiate themselves as forward-looking companies that are engaging and participating in this low carbon economy and realizing that they have a responsibility and a large role, but trying to figure out how they do that is really sort of where our whole strategic planning focus is. So on the one hand, it's more work for us that it's so confusing out there because they tend to need more of a navigator through that space. And we tend to sort of go back to, well, let's just talk about performance. But even when we're talking about performance, there's still going to be different ways to report on that. And when there's a lot of different systems and different ways of even calculating the same metric. Take, for example, a big one in my industry is methane intensity. And it sounds simple, but you can calculate it about 3 or 4 different ways, depending on who you're reporting it to. It means different things. It gets complicated quick, and it matters who you're going to. So I think the eternal quest for unification, the one ring to rule them all concept is still something that would ease life for actually the consultants as well as the clients to have sort of a standardized and centralized methodology, which I do think in the big picture, there is a movement afoot to have more clarity there. And we will see that in the next few years. So
I know, or I think I know that the SEC came out and they said that they want to start seeing a standardized ESG reporting. Do you think that's going to help, or do you think that's still too much in its infancy?
Yeah, no, the SEC, I mean, the big news there actually is well, it's twofold. It's that, and then they actually established an ESG audit committee. And when the SEC does that, that's kind of a big deal, especially when they staff it. And so they're moving as I would say almost as aggressively as they can. And I would expect to see some sort of hybrid of the TCFD and SASB ESG reporting standards to come upon us in the next year or two. So it's coming. It's just a question of timing and what are we doing in the meantime to prepare for it, right? Are we reporting under the right ones, and are we tracking our metrics the right way that they can be converted easily, or are we missing an opportunity now by not tracking the data that we need to track in order to be sort of future flexible and provide the metrics that are going to matter at the end of the day?
Yeah, so that's led me to have like 2 questions, and I'll just back up one, and I'll try to get back to the other one. So the first one is like what we're seeing a lot in the building environment right now is there's a lot of different certifications out there. There's LEED, there's Fitwell, I think. There's Build Well. I mean, and then there's Well Building. So there's all these different certifications that are out there, and everybody's like, well, which one do I get? And is one trendy more than the other? So I know you've done a lot with LEED. Do you have one that you think is better than another, or do you have any opinion on those?
I definitely have opinions. I don't know if I can tell you with a definitive statement which one is better or best, since they're sort of targeted at different aspects of both performance and design and building sectors and whatnot. I still love LEED for its global coverage and its market leadership, and the way that they sort of consistently raise the bar every 3 years or so to remain playing. That the evolution I like, even though it's a messy process at times and can lead to some confusion. And in particular, though, I am tending to focus more and more on the performance rating systems or methodologies out there, like the ARC performance platform from the USGBC, which is based on LEED, but it's more of a simplified dashboard rather than the overly complicated mess of tracking, for example, every single energy parameter. At the end of the day, what's really important is the same thing that they disclose in energy benchmarking ordinances, which is, what is your total energy use intensity? What is your consumption on a monthly basis? If you really want to geek out, talk about your demand and start really getting into that to that side as well. But ultimately, I think whatever system there is has to be one that can be supported by a deep technical, rigorous analysis if needed for certain segments, certain stakeholders that are interested in that, whether they're interested in energy performance or air quality, which is obviously a big one. But it needs to be coupled with a simple dashboard, a simple top 5, top 10, no more metrics of performance that are easy to aggregate and easy to track over time, because that's where we're at. Getting into every nuanced credit, every nuanced technical detail of a rating system is good if you're a hospital and you really care. You need to have a healthy building, and that is the absolute number one priority. You need to be able to go through every aspect from your air quality to your materials to anything that could impact the healthy experience, from daylight to having places of respite, all that kind of thing. But you also need to be able to communicate that generally in a way that rolls up, in a way that a city has how many of these buildings, or a city, a hospital chain has a very high air quality rating. Something that if somebody doesn't have a lot of time and they want to Google the best hospital with the best air quality in downtown Baltimore, they should be able to find it, right? They should be able to just find that. And something that cuts through the noise, I think, is almost, I'm not going to say more important than building performance overall, but having that information out there, in my mind, is such a critical piece of the component that whatever system offers that simplified dashboard is the one that I'm going to gravitate towards.
And so there's a thing in business that says, what metrics do you want if you can only get one email a week? Right. What metrics do you want to see in that, right? And so it really makes you think, what's really important should I be focusing in on? Not everyone, because we want to see all of them, but what are the ones that are really important to know the business is on track or off track? And I think, the back to what you just said, it's like we got to do the same thing for the building industry. Are we on track or are we off track? What does it need to be? Because people don't understand all the metrics that, people that are in the industry that we geek out on. They don't need to know that. And it just overwhelms them. So if we can just give them concise information that helps them make a decision, that's what we need to be doing.
Absolutely. Is this building healthy for me to enter? Right? Is this, and so much of it, honestly, sometimes, I go into a LEED building, or even when I was building straw bale homes, and a lot of it would be based on feel, right? You go in, and the things like the daylight, like the natural materials, all the things that you may not be able to put a name on, not being an expert, but you feel like, okay, I'm in a space that brings nature in. That sort of biophilic design aspect is critical as well. And that's a little harder to communicate. But once you get people in the door, then you have that sort of feeling about it as well. So you couple that with, like, I don't know how you describe, places that feel the best in Denver, office buildings that have the best feeling. I think you're going to run into some walls there, but metaphorical walls trying to get that done. But you can quantify, which office buildings in Denver are taking measures to have the best indoor air quality, or the best indoor environment for working, which includes things like biophilic design, and which includes things like ergonomic workstations and airflow, and individual controls for thermostats and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And just, it's all about how we interact with buildings, right? I mean, the old ways of interacting with buildings was a place you'd come and sit and, and do your job. And back in the 70s or 80s, people used to smoke at their desk, right? And have T12 lighting that was poor. And now we've come so much further with the way we interact with our buildings, and the way we should be going in the future with how we interact with our buildings and all the way through. So I think, it comes down interesting with your work that you're doing today. And that's actually measuring the outdoor quality around, like your sites and all that, and how the indoor air quality can be in an urban environment. And should that be measured? And is the outdoor air quality bad and the indoor air quality is better, right? I mean, that's the next step, right? Comparing the two and making sure that the indoor air quality can actually be better than the outdoor air quality.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think, you're always going to have these events, air quality events, whether it's a fire or whether it's just a inversion that are going to lead to really poor air quality outside that might be sort of momentary. And so even though your outdoor air quality is generally going to be most of the time better than your indoor air quality, it depends on where you're at, and it depends on those circumstances. And there's going to be some days where it's better in, some days where it's better out. And so how do you account for that? How do you make building occupants aware that it is, now we should be flushing with more air? Maybe now we should limit our outdoor air intake, or can the buildings just do that themselves with minimal occupant interaction? Because really, occupants just want the air to be good, right?
Yeah, I think it's almost just, I mean, nowadays, especially after COVID, it's like indoor air quality, just like it's demand that it's going to be good. Yeah. And there's still many, many buildings that are underventilated, even to the latest ASHRAE 62.1s. When's the last time a filter's been changed? So we still have a long way to go in that industry, and creating a dashboard so that the occupant can actually see it as they walk in and understand the building they're going with. I think is going to go a huge way how people are going to interact with buildings going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I know that for us, we have aware monitors, which is one of these low cost indoor air quality monitors, and we've had that in our 3 offices. It's and it doesn't have the technical. It's not going to be as accurate, but it's also real time, and you get points every 15 minutes or so, or even more frequent in some cases for a number of indoor air quality pollutants, and it's been really useful. I mean, we're engaging with a couple of clients that are interested in exploring different types of air quality monitoring. We're hoping it gets to that point of discussion of, yes, it's great. LEED, for example, allows you to come in and, yearly test it and get take a canister and get a very accurate reading in time at a point in time. But I tend to err on the side that more frequent readings that might be less accurate are going to provide more overall value. If you had to pick high accuracy, low frequency versus low frequency, middle in accuracy, I'd kind of go with the second option, just because you can catch events. And we've been using it to troubleshoot different spaces in our 3 offices. We had a conference room in Houston that everybody was saying it was too cold all the time, and we had the typical office complaint, but we stuck the monitor there for 3 months and found it actually wasn't really that much colder. It was more of but there was a difference in the humidity, and so that'll catch you. And so having that door closed all the time to sort of just turn it into a little sort of a little ice box. So the relative humidity was a little bit different. And just opening the door and letting it integrate and just say, okay, we're going to leave this door open, took care of that problem. So it's a much better space now. And so it's using it to using the tools we have to do that troubleshooting is going to be, I think, an increasingly common practice, even for companies that aren't focused on doing that. Just it's going to be, employees are interested.
Yeah, employees are going to be the ones that drive it. Employees and tenants are going to be the ones that are going to be driving it. Building owners, fortunately, just the way things are structured, they don't want to put a lot in their building. They just look at it as an asset that's going to give them X amount of dollars. So It's got to be that the people that actually interact with it have to drive it. So, but that's a great story with just the relative humidity. Temperature's fine, humidity's high. Well, occupant perceives it a little differently, and it doesn't feel right. And so it's like, okay, well, I mean, we interact with the environment, and we sense those things. Much back what you said before, you walk in and you walk into a building, and you're like, well, I feel good in this building, right? Well, what is it, right? And there's certain things that are going on with it. And then another building, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this building. We were in a building the other day, and just noticing that, hey, the indoor air quality doesn't feel right. So we did a little, we were just doing a little ASHRAE level 1 energy audit, just a quick walkthrough. We didn't see any general exhaust, right? Just bath fan exhaust is all they were relying on, which wasn't enough for the space. And we're like, hey, you're underventilated. Just by walking through it, and you could feel it. So yeah, that's definitely stuff that you have that can go on. So when you were talking about the ESG, and you came back to reporting metrics, and you were like, hopefully we're capturing all the metrics that we're going to need in a couple of years. What do I mean, it is kind of hard. How much data, what data is good data? How much data you collect? There's a cost of data. Data is going to start, data is the new gold essentially. So what are you doing to make sure that you are capturing? Are you just capturing it all, or are you being kind of like looking at a trend? What are you doing with the data that you are gathering?
We're in an interesting space for a lot of our ESG type of clients. They're focused on maybe greenhouse gas emissions, and especially of that, the oil and gas ones, clients in particular are really focused on that. Let me speak to that really quick, and then talk a little bit more about buildings. But on the oil and gas side, the approach varies to what do we have to report and what do we expect to have to report. So let's make sure that those controls are in place, and that we have meters in the right places, that we have continuous monitoring. Methane leaks is really the biggest issue in oil and gas right now. So there's a whole different level. You can do satellite monitoring, you can do drone-based monitoring, you can do ground-based monitoring, you can do flyovers. And each of these things has a cost associated, frequency and accuracy. Some are approved methods for monitoring by the EPA, some are not, but they will give you as an operator a better sense of whether you have any big leaks, or whether you have any leaks that have been leaking for days. And so there's all these calculations that go into it, but putting continuous monitoring on every site at every place, which is sort of best in class, is incredibly expensive. And so nobody's doing, well, there might be an operator or two out there that is doing all of their sites. But even the ones that have generally been really progressive are having continuous monitoring at a portion of their sites, maybe behind a gas plant or something, every single one behind that gas plant, so they can look at this certified natural gas, which, don't get me started, but is super interesting and is where we are going in our way. But it's that cost to value balance, and then what you have to report versus what you think you're going to have to report versus what you just want to know from a business standpoint, right? Because in that example, any lost gas that could potentially be captured is saleable gas, right? So ideally, you're not losing any gas and you're selling it all. But there are some sources that have such infrequent releases or such small releases that putting a meter on them is a huge cost relative to the potential gain. So anyway, that's my industry. In regards to buildings, in particular, thinking about what data to collect and why, we have a number of lead projects going on in the city of Westminster, the downtown Westminster area, and we're not actually I should be clear, we're not actually sort of working for most of them the actual lead certification, but we're working on behalf of the city to see what information, to your point, that is worth collecting and to validate, other than are they certified or not, which is what they're doing right now. So part of that is, again, let's focus on what's important right now, which is air quality, right? Which is that indoor environment. So if we can, even if the city had to supply some of these air quality monitors or something that might be a worthwhile investment if we can say that of the buildings sampled in our downtown area, the air quality is exceedingly high. That can give people comfort. It can help for marketing, new space, because there's still a bunch of developable lots there. And so air quality, I think, is air quality, energy use, water use. They're really focused on water use in downtown Westminster, and they really sort of champion that. So you have a lot of buildings that are really kicking butt on the low water use credits and categories. But we'd like to see that continue over time. So moving from water, energy, air. I mean, those are the big things on people's mind. On my mind is embodied carbon, but that's because I am in this space and I am a sort of a carbon geek. But I think that's less common. I think people are more concerned about the occupant experience.
So that's all very interesting in that I live in the city of Westminster. So that's interesting in that the city's actually looking about putting in the monitorings. And I know like in Denver, any building above 25,000 square feet needs to be put in the Energy Star portfolio manager to be benchmarked. What they're doing with that, I mean, they're still the thresholds are going to come down, and what they're going to start making people do is going to be interesting. So, but that could actually lead to that the city is going to start saying you need to put in monitoring for these type of things. On if your buildings, EUI is this, you may have to do this or whatever. That could be interesting to see how the cities can go about driving some of that in the buildings. I hadn't really thought of that until you had mentioned that. So that's actually fairly interesting.
Right. Yeah. Working at the energy office, we had a lot of long-term plans like that. Right. So you sort of put in a policy right now that gives you the capability to put it in, and it's not the stated purpose. It's not even necessarily the intent, but it is a potential outcome. Right. If you have that, and you have the really poor performers, generally with energy benchmarking, at least, we look to peer pressure and point of sale disclosures to drive that, right? Where if you get to the point of trying to sell your building and you have to say, along with everything else, you say, oh, by the way, my building's an energy pig, that is a little awkward and can tend to affect valuation. So you do that. And then you also see that if you look at the map and you are the worst performer by far, everybody can see that. And in your mind, even though not a ton of people are actually probably looking at that map, the people that are the most important people in the world. So hopefully that drives you to make some of those changes. But it could absolutely, and it is the first step, if you need to have a first step towards actually mandating that buildings over a certain level make improvements, which is, I believe, the direction they've gone in New York. So starting with that commercial benchmarking and then moving towards if you're over a certain energy score, we need to, there are significant penalties until you get below it.
There's the off-truth, is the government overstepping, or are they doing the right things? I mean, there's all that comes in, but sometimes people need a little bit of a nudge to kind of move. So if that's what it's doing, I think it's good to get somebody to move that may not actually move just because, right? Yeah, exactly. So, and you kind of mentioned this, so I kind of a little more curious about you. You mentioned you were a carbon geek. So is that kind of what brought you into the built environment, or what kind of actually, you mentioned you were doing construction out of college. So was it just being in the construction and building and saying this stuff's cool and then got interested in carbon, or what actually kind of led you to that path?
Well, I think ultimately, I mean, for better or worse, I consider the ledger of my life to be my ultimate measure of accountability and responsibility. And on that ledger, in fairly bright numbers, are my total carbon balance, right? So what have I consumed? How much carbon have I emitted from my activities versus how much I have sequestered, how much I have offset, and how much in my professional work I have led directly to or indirectly to being captured or sequestered. So because I understand how carbon works and I understand that global impact, ultimately it's somewhat of a selfish motive, right? Like I want to make sure that that my balance sheet is in the positive when I kick the bucket, right? Like I don't want to be another person that has a negative balance, that I have emitted more carbon throughout my life than I've sequestered, that I've caused more harm than good. And I'm going to do what I can to put that back into the win column. So I recognize that doing that is carbon. And with all these projects in the built environment, most of the carbon is in by the time they're built, right? I mean, there's a ton that gets emitted throughout the life, and then we can focus on the area where it's easiest to make the biggest reductions, is when the building is being built. So having that discussion with owners and developers, and getting them to look at the life cycle analysis associated there of choosing lower carbon materials or even lower carbon mixes is so huge and so immediate. I'm not going to be around for the lifespan of all these buildings, but I am going to be around when I'm engaged as such in the construction of them. So that's the focus. It's really all about me. If I can get people to lower their carbon and I'm associated with it, then I get to take credit for part of that on my balance sheet.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot there to unpack. And I totally agree, right? We got to, a lot of people are like carbon tax, carbon this, what I mean? People freak out about it. And it's like, no, listen, we're just trying to make a ledger here. We're just trying to balance out a ledger. And this is the way they're thinking about doing it. Whether it's the right way, the wrong way, I don't know. But if you have a ledger and you're just saying, listen, we want to see more positive than negative, do what you want to do. We just want to see more positive. That's it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And that's all we're trying to get to is figure that out. And it'll change thinking, right? I mean, it'll change how we go about doing certain things. Back to what you said about the materials that go into a building. Do we tear down a building just to build another building that's a little bit different shape or what have you? Or do we say, how can we repurpose this existing building to make it into something that it was never intended to do? And what's the embodied carbon within the materials there? You do it right. And LEED gives you so many points for using an old building. It's like that's what you do, right? There's just so many LEED points there, which is great. So it's like helping out the balance sheet there. And I agree, it is a balance sheet. That's the way we need to look at it, make it, back and forth the way it is. It's just, I feel the exact same way. When I kick the bucket, I want to have a positive. I want to be positive on the thing. Doesn't mean I don't fly to Europe and go rock climbing, right?
Yeah, no, I know you do. But I bet you check the box for and pay that extra $10 for the green offset if it's presented to you as well. So
yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah. What are you currently researching out that's kind of got your curiosity? What's the thing that you think is the most coolest thing that you're seeing coming along in the technology and in the both what your current work with the monitoring and then what's going on in the built environment? What's kind of got your curiosity there?
Well, we got a few things. I think the one that I mentioned earlier, this methane intensity thing, is one that is a little under the radar and not for much longer. I think even with the recent report, remarks in Scotland, methane is the thing for the short term because of how fast and impactful it gets into the atmosphere. And so reducing methane is therefore one of the most important things we can do as a country, as an industry. It is more of an oil and gas field thing, but this idea right now that there's no differentiation between natural gas, it's just all natural gas, is silly, right? Because some natural gas operators leak a lot of methane on their way to getting it to your house for your furnace or your stove. Others don't. Others have taken proactive steps, and oftentimes regulatory required, but oftentimes beyond that, to reduce their emissions dramatically. So when you think about it, if methane emissions at sort of a standard leak rate, I believe the EPA came up with some number like if you had 2.3% over the leakage over the course of the value chain, the natural gas value chain, then it's worse than coal from a carbon perspective, right? And so it matters which natural gas you use. It matters which natural gas is sold, and so finding that there's nothing out there or there hasn't been to differentiate that is preposterous. So now there are a group of organizations out there, including one in Colorado here. We have Project Canary and their TrustWell certification that look at operators and reward them for doing that continuous monitoring and doing that thing that keeps their emissions lowest. And then that gas now actually on that vein, there's an operator that we work with that has actually starting to sell that gas to Xcel Energy. And now Xcel, actually, I believe even in the past week, has come out with a commitment that all of their gas is going to be certified under some way or another, which is great news for Colorado, for Minnesota, for anywhere in Xcel territory, because what that says to me as a consumer is hopefully there's an option in the not too near future or not too distant future that says I can check the box and pay a slight cost premium for green natural gas, right? Instead of just natural gas, I want the natural gas that has the lowest carbon impact or the lowest carbon equivalent impact on global warming, and I'll have that option as a consumer, and I will gladly pay that premium. I mean, I will happily and contentedly, because that improves my ledger pretty significantly, and it's not something that a lot of people are thinking about. So it's big moves. The company, the one I particularly like, is called MIQ, which is actually an RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute spinoff, and we are going to be auditing, set up to be an auditing team for facilities using that certification. But that one is really focused on the scientific and technical basis of reducing methane intensity as much as possible. So that's frankly what I'm most excited about, because the global warming potential, we could go on a whole tangent. I know I've already gone, but not to leave the barn entirely, just to be part way out. But the global warming potential calculations of methane are junk. In some levels, right? The way that they try to measure it over a 100-year lifespan compared to carbon, but it's only in the atmosphere for maybe 18 years. There's just things with the methodology that make it so. The bottom line is methane needs to be reduced. Methane leakage is the biggest item that we can mess with, and I'm seeing more focus on that. So that's where I'm at. That's where my head is. I wish I had more built environment stuff for you. It's just to me, that's sort of secondary, and I can't have as much of an impact as perhaps I once could in the built environment.
Yeah, I guess so. With that, what are your customers seeing? I mean, a lot of your customers are on the ban, because like you mentioned before, right? It's sellable gas that they're actually leaking,
right?
So, what's the cost analysis of fixing a leak, making not having a leaky pipeline versus having a leaky pipeline? Right. Is there any type of payback on that? There is.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which point in the chain. I mean, doing pneumatic retrofits is the main thing they're doing, and they're switching to instrument air, which is electric instead of using gas, because you lose a lot of gas out of your pneumatic controls. And that's the big thing that everybody in the oil and gas field is doing. They're just, some are doing it faster than others, because I can even spout you a number. On a tons of CO2 equivalent reduced, you can get somewhere between $5 and $10 in total all-in retrofit costs to do that. Sometimes lower, depending on how many you're doing and cost efficiencies and whatnot. So if you're talking about it from a carbon perspective, that's pretty small, and that's using sort of what numbers that, as I mentioned, I think I don't necessarily 100% stand behind. They're just what the industry has and what some scientists have used. So I think that the actual global warming potential and the value, the bang for your buck, is better. But then there's other things. As soon as you do those are the low-hanging. Those are, as we say in the building industry, those are the low-hanging fruits, right? It gets way more complicated once you've replaced all your pneumatic compressors. Then you start looking at your tanks. You start looking at bleed rates of all sorts of different pieces of equipment in there. And they become more expensive to fix, and you save less gas. And some of that gas can't be rerouted into the pipeline. I mean, you go up to North Dakota, that's why you have all the flares, because they don't have enough. They don't have quite the infrastructure to put it somewhere that's part of it. So it's a complicated problem, and it's not a straight answer. But just like the built environment, you take care of those low hanging fruit, and you do all of that. Then then it's harder to find that money for some of the more the less return items.
Yeah, I mean, you walk into a building and you see pneumatic controls, and you're just like, a DDC
Right.
Retrofit here is a slam dunk, right?
Yep.
I mean, you don't even really need it. You're just like, it's going to pay for itself so quick.
Yep.
Don't even worry about it.
Right.
So yeah, so it's two different industries, same problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We just make it electric. Give us some instrument air. We can. Probably to take that further, if you had sort of direct digital controls, I don't know how that would work in the oil field, but I wouldn't be surprised if it worked all right.
Yeah. So, what's an example of a design or construction or a mistake or failure that you experienced, and what was the biggest takeaway, or what did you learn from it?
Oh, that's a good question. I was learning as I went on all my sort of straw bale building. That's probably when I made the most mistakes. And that those ended up being mostly things that could be fixed, but spent far too much time doing so. Generally, efficient construction practices. I think I've always been fascinated by the envelope, building a tight envelope, and how do you deal with some of those really tricky problems right at the top of the wall? How do you manage to avoid thermal breaks, and how do you get into, and really sort of geek out on how do you get a continuous insulation barrier? And I've seen that mistake is made every day. It's continuously made. It's constant, and it's frustrating because we do have answers now, and we do have better solutions that don't cost a lot more. But you're creating drafts, you're creating heat transfer points all over the place, and it's just silly. So that bothers me because I've seen it, and I know it's addressable. The other one that I think is completely inexcusable now is when I see buildings built without at least the infrastructure for electric vehicle charging, right? If you're not putting in the pipes, the conduit, for God's sakes, to electrify a good portion of the parking lots that or the parking spots that you are putting in, why? It just costs so little more, and it's I'm not asking to put stations on everyone, but it's coming. And the retrofit cost of that is so much more if you're trying to put it in after the fact. Just put in the pipes and stub them off, So I've certainly been doing a lot of preaching on that one. And that's, I think the sort of future readiness. I understand developers are in for a turnaround, but if you're not doing some sort of future proofing in your building and thinking about the low cost items, it's hard to see.
Yeah, the building envelope stuff is definitely, it's still a challenge, and I don't know why. We're dealing with the project right now where we're doing some consulting on the on an envelope, and I'm like, I don't understand why we're going through some pretty basic stuff here and having to do it. It is what it is, but it is one of those things. Mm-hmm. And installation schemes is getting complicated, and there's just not enough people that have the expertise in it. And fair enough. I don't think every architect should know how to do the envelope, but then there needs to be a third party that does, right? And that person needs to detail out all that stuff that does it well. We do it on our engineering side, whether it's it's a HERS rater or somebody along those lines. Somebody needs to be responsible for the envelope and take that on and make it the thing, right? We like it really tight and well insulated building because it makes the mechanical systems really small, so we get to do cool stuff. And then stuff that seems expensive isn't expensive. It's like, well, if you do it like this is the price, and it's not as expensive. So that's our thing. And then future proofing buildings, boy, that's a whole topic in itself, right? Electric vehicles, solar ready, all that stuff that's supposed to happen needs to happen. We should just be doing it. And in electric charging, it's coming. There's just no way that we're.
The single biggest opportunity we have is already cost effective, and that is more renewables on the electric grid, coupled with the other part, which isn't as cost effective, but is getting there with electrification of vehicles and homes. There's no avoiding it at this point. It's just the longer you avoid it, the worse you make the climate in the meantime.
Yeah, and the inertia is already there. I mean, the inertia is taking over. It's starting to build, and in
the
10
pricing
years
is there. The pricing is there. I mean, utilities are switching that model not because they have to, but because the pricing is there. You look at the local air pollution impacts, right, of vehicles. That's even bigger in my mind, frankly, than the carbon impacts, right? If people can't see that everybody sees and hates local air pollution, so get an electric car. There's zero, right? I mean, it's not that complicated, other than the fact that you have to shell out for an electric car. But I mean, we can have that discussion too. I mean, I'll put this out for the public to hear. But when I combined all my rebates and got a Leaf, I got, I think, around $22,000 back. I mean, come on, like you can still play the market if you're looking and you're savvy and you do it. But the longer you wait, the more these rebates are going to go away. The more the less incentives are going to be needed. But now's still a great time to buy an electric car. It really still is. And that those first two benefits are nothing to scoff at.
Well, and so I still have my little Prius. It has 135,000 miles on it, and I'm thinking about getting an electric car. And I talked with Graham Sweat earlier, and he told me, he goes, just buy an electric car, Stephen. Give that Prius to somebody else that they could save the carbon that way. Just buy the electric car.
Yep. And I can tell you the three factors to look for when it's time, and one of them is an Excel rebate or dealer rebate. And the other, you got to watch that 250,000 cars sold mark, or when you lose the federal tax credit. You put those three factors together, and you just jump when you're ready to jump, and then you make that move, and it's it'll work out for you.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a technical hiccup. How what'd you say the state tax was at? Federal tax?
The state tax rebate is, I think, it's for full electric about $4,500 right now.
Oh yeah.
And so then $7,500 from the feds, still, as long as it's you can't get a Tesla anymore, but you can get, I think you can still get a Leaf, which is what I have, and still qualify. And then, I mean, you can get dealer rebates. I mean, Excel offered a $10,000 rebate for a while for some specific models.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, the financials are working out for the electric cars. The momentum's there. It's going to happen. Yep. So yeah, it's interesting. So what is your favorite building and why?
Oh, I know. I saw that one, and I didn't give it the appropriate amount of thought that I should. I've seen some. I'm gonna take an easy one and just say that there are some Cobb buildings in Oregon that I still am just in love with, because they're just like fairy houses. They're all curves and hidden in the woods, kind of little spots that they still might burn, so have a little furnace running or a wood stove. But I don't know, from a really nice modern building, I don't have an answer.
Fair enough. And what's your favorite place and why?
My favorite place in general is, first of all, I can't tell you, because then there's going to be more people there. But I will say it's somewhere in the mountains. It's not too far away. And it's because in this particular place, you can be on top of the world in a high alpine meadow, but still see 365 degrees around of being above the world. So it's a very special place, not too far away, and that's all I can say about that.
You got to keep that one on the down low. It's Colorado. More and more people are moving to Colorado. Our little sacred spots are getting full.
I will not be tweeting, Instagramming, or otherwise sharing pictures of this particular spot ever.
Yeah. So what's the biggest lesson you learned in the past year about creating a better environment?
Oh, I think the renewed focus on air quality is timely. I think that the healthy spaces are what people want, what people need. I mean, I learned that, a whole building filtration system doesn't really matter for COVA as much as just a HEPA filter, in a localized small space. So as we start to sort of understand a little bit more about, is it really worth putting UV filtration in a whole building ventilation system? depends on what you're looking for and looking to do with it. But is it worth getting a small, efficient HEPA filter for the general workspace you're in? Yes. And so I think the evolution of people's understanding of the sort of over dramatic or over engineered air quality methods compared to the simpler ones, or a right size engineered method, are becoming more refined and more effective. And I think that's a really good thing. I think that just coming up with what is, the right wrench for the right bolt, rather than just sort of, just torquing it to death, is been really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Sometimes an elegant solution is the best, and I think indoor air quality monitoring is key. Right? You may not need to do anything. Just measure your indoor air quality. Yep. It may be fine for the space that it is. Maybe perfect. Just monitor it. Right? Yep. I mean, we do a lot of SenseWare monitoring, and they're pretty expensive monitoring for some of our clients. And those are a little bit, but like you were saying, that there's other ones that you can use. CO2 monitoring, and just monitor CO2 as a proxy. If the CO2 is high, you've got bad indoor air quality. Right? Do something about it, and just in elegant solutions and monitor it. And I think there's too many people running around saying you got to do all this stuff, but just monitor is the very first thing. I think is the industry needs just to monitor and understand the importance of the monitoring.
Yep, I agree. Yeah. Can I turn a quick question on you?
Sure.
On that monitoring topic, I have heard the term reset as a technical accreditation that some of these monitors have and some of these air monitors don't. I believe the term is RESET, and that reset accreditation. Is that, I don't know whether it's a new thing or an old thing. Does that ring a bell?
It does not ring a bell. That's something totally new to me. And if we had a little bit more time, I'd Google it really quick and see what's going on.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to, I guess the question then is, how do you determine which air monitor is good enough? I mean, measuring CO2, they've gotten a lot better with that. And you have a lot less errors and just worthless monitors like you had on some demand control ventilation systems for a while. But I mean, how do you know what's good enough? I mean, do you just look to industry to tell you, or are there accreditation standards, or what do you typically recommend?
So calibration, right? So calibrate it first. Right. Yep. So do a calibration on it. CO2 sensors should be calibrated every year. Just hit them with a little CO2, see the spike, and that all right, it's reading right. You can have a little local handheld meter, and make sure they're both reading accurately between each other. So that's the best, right? And do that and do that often. And then keep the data, right? I mean, and trend the data and store the data. And that way you could see historical stuff that's going on with the data. That's the other thing. Make sure we're keeping the data so we can go back and look at it and see how things are doing it. And then if there is a sensor failure, know that there's a sensor failure. And I think that's the other thing. Sensors fail, people go, whatever. You may get a building engineer that goes in there and just overrides something. That pesky little sensor. Well, hey, that sensor's important, right? So that's the other thing is more knowledge in the industry that like, hey, that sensor's actually important. But if you have a dashboard and it's displaying stuff that, there's no hiding from what's going on there. And I think that's giving more stuff back to the tenant or people entering a space is going to be it. So dashboards are key. So.
Awesome. Yeah, we're seeing that too. I love the dashboards. We had one of those monitors the last company I've worked. So I've got probably 4 years of experience with these little monitors, and we did a couple sort of setting them right next to each other to calibrate, and they were off on a couple key parameters, and they're not the most accurate. But I think actually after this conversation, maybe we'll go out and buy another one that we can do that same test of sitting it next to the ones we have in our 3 offices. And just do some additional calibration and see where they're at. Yeah,
exactly. So for someone listening and they'd like to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and I know all my connections. I will always talk with someone before connecting with them, but I can be found there. Just Conor Merrigan on LinkedIn. Is a good way for professional contacts. SpiritENV.com is our website. So I'm certainly findable there. as well. And yeah, so I think that's, I'm not that hard to find. I've been in Colorado pretty much all my life. And if you just take a little look, you'll find me, and there's plenty of ways to connect.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah. Thanks for participating in the Better Buildings, Better Society podcast. Really appreciate you, and it was a great conversation. I learned a lot about the monitoring, a lot about what's going on in the natural gas, oil and natural gas, about the methane monitoring, and how some people are actually really, really taking it seriously and taking it to the next level. And the levels of gas that we can actually choose now on what we're buying. The global warming potential of methane is so high, it needs to be, there's a big problem there. Again, puts a lot on your balance sheet, right? Like you were talking about, puts a lot there for you, which is great. Right? I mean, that's what needs to be happening. So, and the monitoring, the indoor air quality monitoring, both indoor and outdoor, is going to be. That's the thing. We need to be monitoring both, and especially with the wildfires, like the natural gas, methane, what's going on with that, and then just the pollution, how we can solve that with going to electric cars. So
those are answers. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you doing this and reaching out. I think it's of great value, frankly. And I hope it gets tons of people looking at it and educating themselves and getting some good information out of it, and finding some ways to really keep the movement towards better buildings moving forward aggressively.
Yeah. And so, with that, I want to thank the listeners for listening. Hope you guys took away some nuggets, some good stuff in there that, just maybe make you think a little bit different about things. So it's great. And then, visit us at World Wide Web, dma-eng.com, and check out our resources, our blog posts, and of course, past episodes of the podcast. And again, really want to thank Conor for participating.